What defines the modern world? Often, the fate of nations is decided not just on the blood-soaked battlefield, but in opulent halls around a mahogany table. Today, we go back to 1815, to the very first time the great powers sat down to completely redesign the globe. This is the story of the Congress of Vienna and the birth of a new world order. With Napoleon Bonaparte's final defeat at Waterloo, the Napoleonic Wars, a conflict on the sheer scale of a world war, finally came to an end. France, the greatest power in Europe, which had challenged the British Empire and its allies for a staggering 150 years, had finally accepted defeat. When Napoleon was first exiled in 1814, the victors of the war, Austria, Britain, Prussia, and Russia, began negotiating a new world order in Vienna. This Congress stands as one of the great economic and political turning points of modern times. The Congress of Vienna was the first of those historic gatherings that decided the global order, preceding later pivotal events like the Paris Peace Conference of 1919, the Potsdam Conference of 1945, and the Moscow Treaty of 1990 regarding Germany. What makes Vienna unique, however, is that it was the very first peace treaty where international spheres of influence were distributed directly at the diplomatic negotiating table. Moreover, this conference was far more successful than the three modern conferences just mentioned. The system established by the Congress of Vienna protected the international order from a catastrophe on the scale of a world war for a full 100 years, right up until 1914. Consider the contrast. The 1919 Paris Peace Treaty, which ended World War I, laid the foundations for World War II through its harsh and unjust conditions. The Potsdam Conference, held as the final curtain fell on World War II, triggered the Cold War. And today, we are experiencing the Ukraine war because of the hollow, unwritten, and vague guarantees given to the Russian Federation in the Moscow Treaty that ended the Cold War. Specifically, verbal assurances that NATO would not expand. Another point that renders the Vienna Conference unique is that all five parties representing the great powers were, individually, superb negotiators. The British Empire was represented by Foreign Secretary Lord Castlereagh, Austria by Chancellor Prince Clemens von Metternich, Prussia by Prime Minister August von Hardenberg, Russia directly by Tsar Alexander I, and defeated France by its wily foreign minister, Prince Charles Maurice de Talleyrand. The British position aimed to position the British Empire as the sole superpower of the international order by protecting the gains of the war. The Royal Navy already registered this absolute superiority throughout the world, except for continental Europe. However, within the framework of their classical diplomacy, the British did not desire the Russian Empire to become the sole dominant continental power following the defeat of France. Therefore, against the greatest power on continental Europe, which in 1815 was fast becoming Russia, the British sought a balance of power alongside Austria and Prussia. This strategic stance is the ancestor of the complex chain of alliances that the USA established in Western Europe and the Far East after 1945. The British also wanted France to be surrounded by stronger neighboring states so that it could never threaten the New World Order again. To achieve this, the reverse of the system Napoleon had created, a system of weak satellite states along France's borders, had to be implemented. The delegation of the Russian Empire was under the direct command of Tsar Alexander I. Russia aimed to tear off a large slice from Poland following its partition, while simultaneously eyeing the Slavic populations in the Balkans. The Russian Tsar was acutely aware of his immense superiority over the Ottoman Empire, and he desired to use this superiority without the hindrance of England or Austria. Russia's greatest trump card at the conference was its massive army stationed in the rural areas outside of Paris. This influence was so unforgettable that years later, in 1945, when Soviet leader Stalin was asked if he was pleased that the victorious Soviet armies had captured Berlin and Vienna, he simply replied, "Alexander I reached Paris." The Austrian Chancellor von Metternich would become the true architect of the Vienna Order. Even as early as 1815, The empire's multinational structure was signaling danger. The Austrian economy was completely dependent on continental Europe. It possessed no overseas colonies for highly profitable trade, while its ancient enemy, France, existed to its west, ready to rise again at any moment. A much more dangerous rival, Russia, had appeared in the east. Representing two multinational empires, Metternich and Alexander I were also trying to force two dangerous genies released by the French Revolution back into the bottle. The French Revolution had proven that peasants, workers, and the petty bourgeoisie could seek their rights using force if necessary. The other dangerous idea spread by the revolution was nationalism. Against these tendencies, which would later become integral parts of both left and right-wing movements, the response of Austria and Russia would be the classical conservatism that formed the foundation of existing multinational empires. An important problem for Austria was that the numerous principalities and kingdoms in the region defined as Germany were increasingly entering the sphere of influence of the Kingdom of Prussia. Austria desired the continuation of the existing order by limiting Prussia's presence in Germany and was also trying to grab a share from divided Poland. Prussia's goal was to seize wealthy Saxony and the Ruhr region, and to obtain the region they called West Prussia from divided Poland. Prussia's greatest fear was that France would rise again in the future, crush the weak German states, and reach the Prussian border. Therefore, Prussia would suggest partitioning France at the conference. Similar attempts would be seen later when France insisted on partitioning Germany after World War I, and when Germany was divided into military occupation zones by the four victorious countries after 1945. Prince de Talleyrand, defending the French position, was a brilliant and unique man. He had been involved in diplomacy and politics since before the French Revolution. He had saved his neck from Robespierre's guillotine during the Terror, the most dangerous period of the Revolution, and subsequently served as foreign minister under revolutionary governments like the Directory, the Consulate, and under Napoleon himself. Now he was the foreign minister of the Bourbon dynasty, which placed the French crown back on its head after Napoleon. He was trying to recover in Vienna from the damage of the toxic legacy Napoleon's defeat had left to France. The conference was concluded after 9 months, just 9 days before Napoleon's defeat at Waterloo. Although Napoleon Bonaparte was a great commander, often called the Marshal of Marshals, his final defeat in 1815 was inevitable. Even if Napoleon had won at Waterloo, the eventual victory of the Allies was indisputable due to their immense military and economic superiority. Napoleon's fate had actually been sealed back in October 1812, when he was forced to retreat from the ashes of Moscow. As a result of the Congress of Vienna, the international map took the following shape. Russia took the largest share from the partition of Poland, gaining the east of the country and Warsaw. It retained Finland, which it had snatched from Sweden. Although Prussia could not take all of Saxony, it obtained a large part of this region. From divided Poland, it gained Posen, today's Poznan, known as West Prussia. It also added the important port city of Danzig to its territories. In the Rhineland, it gained the Saarland, possessing important coal reserves, and the Moselle region. The victors did not unify the German states, but turned them into a strong confederation against France. The mosaic of 300 kingdoms, principalities, and duchies that were the remnants of the old Holy Roman Empire was transformed into the German Confederation, consisting of 39 states. While Austria and Prussia retained their voting rights within the old structure, Austria would be the designated leader of this confederation. The Kingdom of the Netherlands was given the old Austrian Flanders, that is, today's Belgium. England took Malta, the Cape Colony in today's South Africa, and Ceylon. There was now no power left in India that could rival England. The west of France was to be occupied by the Allies for 5 years, though the Allies ended this symbolic occupation early in 1818. Austria gained Tarnople, Salzburg, Tyrol, the Venice region, Lombardy, and Ragusa in Dalmatia. And finally, the Pope was given back sovereignty over Rome. France returned to its pre-French Revolution borders. Stronger states were now established on its frontiers to contain it: the Kingdom of the Netherlands in the north, the Kingdom of Piedmont in the southeast, Prussia in the Rhineland, and the German Confederation in Germany. The international integrity of Spain, where the crown was returned to a separate branch of the Bourbons, was guaranteed. A very similar guarantee would be given for Poland against Germany in the 1930s. The Vienna Order also condemned slavery. Although British diplomacy insisted on the total abolition of slavery, it could not get this universally accepted. But the Imperial Navy patrolling the Atlantic would, to some extent, prevent the slave trade. The British Empire was now the sole superpower of the New World Order. The British monopolized sea power entirely. British naval power supported economic superiority against its rivals and provided the option to economically strangle rivals by blockading them as desired. The capacity of the British merchant marine and navy facilitated the supply of British goods and the procurement of raw materials to the faster developing markets of North America, the West Indies, Latin America, India, and the Far East. The British had created a balance for Europe in Vienna, but this balance did not apply to overseas markets and new colonies. The British would ruthlessly use their undisputed superiority in this area. Furthermore, England was in the midst of a massive production revolution, the First Industrial Revolution. Their insistence on the abolition of slavery was not based solely on humanism and liberalism. The Industrial Revolution needed workers, not slaves. The Pax Britannica had begun.